its analysis of spending by CCGs and its analysis of the use of co-production by CCGs, that is, involving those who actually use the services in their design, consistently shows that Oxfordshire has been underspending and underperforming. I should say that I now know many people who've been diagnosed with a severe and enduring mental health condition who, with the right care and given the right reasons to be hopeful about their future, have made very good recoveries, and some are doing important jobs. Before I end, I'd just like to mention that I had to submit my speech in advance, and it was edited to remove any reference to specific cases which risked identifying any individual. Ironically, this included a paragraph which had been written by such an individual themselves. In my experience, those who either themselves or through a family member have experienced blighted lives or even abruptly ended lives because of a system which is not fit for purpose are keen for people to know this. Those instances of people getting lost in the system, either through appointments being transferred...
You're a bit over time, but I'll allow you to finish.
Okay, I've just got transferred to places they just cannot get to, or being discharged to severely overloaded GP practices are all far too common. So to conclude, and going back to my official script, I'll just say, letting people go into crisis because of lack of funds is like standing by while people have the first symptoms of a heart attack. Not supporting them with the right housing is asking for a relapse to happen. Discharging them when you know they're still ill is playing with fire. I urge you to support the motion.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come here. I think we have Councillor Upton who's going to respond.
Yeah, Francis, Cyril, thank you both very much indeed for coming. I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody here for coming to speak to us. There are lots of startling facts and figures, and I'll refer to some of them later during the motion, but they can all seem very abstract, and it's only when we actually hear from somebody like you who's had to deal with the daily grind, the struggle to get treated, that it actually starts to become real for us. The Council signed up to the Prevention Concordat for Better Mental Health earlier this year alongside some other partners, which I think includes Rethink Mental Illness. So I am aware of some of the amazing work that you do. And we have to make sure that that wasn't just an empty gesture on our part. And I think your speech today is exactly what we need to remind us what these statistics actually mean for people's lives. Though the City Council is not responsible for mental health services, we do recognise how critical they are to tackling problems faced by many of our residents, and we try to address these through working in partnership. You've identified a terrible problem here in Oxford with staffing and high staff turnover. That would be bad enough for a physical health condition, getting that dealt with, but I can't imagine anything worse for someone with mental health problems, where, as you said, a therapeutic relationship cannot be nurtured if you're seeing somebody different every time. And I and several of my fellow councillors here today, sitting very close to you there, have tried to raise the idea of an Oxford waiting with the Trust to try and address the high staff turnover. Thinking about the factors that degrade our mental health, you've outlined also the trauma of being discharged from hospital with nowhere to go. And there are a couple of initiatives the City Council has been involved in that I think are a step in the right direction. One I mentioned earlier today here was the Trailblazer project, where we've someone from our housing and homelessness team has been embedded in both of the hospital trust discharge teams, allowing them to try and navigate the complex route to get good accommodation for a patient rather than abandoning them out into the street. Another initiative I'm really proud of is we funded 2 embedded mental health workers into our council house tenancy sustainment team, and they've had some hard-won successes. There's no quick fix on this, but they have been able to engage with people with mental health problems, prevent them getting evicted, get them back on the medication and re-engage with the world. So thank you for underlining for us just how important it is to fight to get mental health needs considered at all levels, and that absolutely includes getting treatment properly funded and prioritised in acute settings and in the community, but also how crucial it is that we tackle the things that cause poor mental health in the first place. So thank you both very much indeed for coming.
Thank you very much. So we now have speakers in support of the motion on Kashmir, and that's Sephora Telly and Fayaz Khan. Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dear Lord Mayor, respected councillors and all the others present today, good evening, and thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about Kashmir, the place of my heritage. For over 9 years, I've been working with vulnerable people, and I'm currently working in Oxford, supporting victims of human trafficking. I've heard many first-hand accounts of the desperate circumstances that push people to leave their homes, and the unrest in Kashmir is unfortunately no exception. Just recently, an Oxford businessman anxiously described to me the ways in which he's trying to get his younger brothers to leave Kashmir, to go anywhere, somewhere safer. This is a particular concern since August of this year, as Kashmir has entered a new chapter of chaos and anxiety. Thousands of young men and boys have been victims of arbitrary arrest and detention, picked up as they go about their daily routine or during targeted raids during the night. And many have harrowing stories and show evidence of torture whilst in detention. The indiscriminate use of pellet guns on civilians, too, has continued to injure, blind, and kill many young people and children. With internet services still completely blocked and mobile phone services only partially reinstated, communication has had major impact. We were unable to speak to our family in Kashmir for over 2 months, and even individuals within Kashmir were unable to communicate and coordinate on the most basic of things. Children have not been able to go to school for almost 4 months, and the elderly and unwell have been dying from otherwise manageable illnesses. The British Medical Journal, in fact, described the situation as having led to a blatant denial of the right to healthcare. Kashmiris have not just suffered in Kashmir, though. Even outside of Kashmir in India, they suffer repercussions just by virtue of them being Kashmiris. So, for example, one of my cousins, who is a student in Rajasthan, he was beaten, humiliated, and paraded through the centre of the town and made to wear women's clothing. And recently, an Indian government spokesperson tried to make the justification that the life of a citizen is more important than civil liberties. But as somebody with all of my extended family in Kashmir, and having visited many times since childhood, these words are just empty and meaningless. Because for over 30 years now, Kashmir has essentially been in a state of martial law. 1989 was when the extreme militarization of the valley began, leading to its current status as the most densely militarized zone in the world. Compounded by so-called emergency powers that have ensured an environment of impunity for military actions, during this time there has been a legacy of over 70,000 killings, 8,000 disappearances, numerous mass graves of unidentified bodies, thousands of reports of torture, mass rape, as well as arbitrary arrest, detention, and destruction of property. Understandably, all of which has had a massive impact on the mental health and well-being of Kashmiris, the majority of whom have known nothing but military occupation. The UN, members of European Parliament, and others have started to speak out. And as a city that values and encourages diversity and discourse, Oxford, taking a stand today to seek justice and some accountability for Kashmiris in supporting this motion would be a really fitting and commendable move. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, distinguished councillors and dear participants, good evening. It's a great honor for me to address this House. I want to bring to your kind attention the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Indian occupied Kashmir, which is a continuous cause for British Kashmiris here in the UK in Oxford. As you are well aware, more than 100 days have passed since India imposed curfew in Kashmir. 8 million people, innocent men, women, and children, are detained in their houses. They have no access to internet. They cannot go to schools. They cannot go to hospitals. And their fundamental human rights have been badly violated. The global community has taken notice of this. The United Nations has called for establishment of an independent commission of inquiry to investigate the human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir. I request this House to speak for the oppressed people of Indian occupied Kashmir and ask the Indian government, as has been rightly asked in the motion put forward in this House by Mr. Altaf Khan, to remove this curfew, to allow the people of Kashmir to freely express their views and to resolve the issue peacefully in accordance with the resolution of the United Nations and according to the free wishes of the people of Kashmir. And I expect from this House, which is the upholder of justice and champion of human rights across the globe. Thank you very much.
And I think now Councillor Brown's got a response for you.
Thank you both very much for coming here today. This is actually the second time that we've had speakers raising concerns about Kashmir, and many in this chamber have already spoken out about our concerns and how we share your concerns, and the concerns of many citizens in Oxford who've got relations in Kashmir, and many who don't, but who can just see some terrible things going on there and are really concerned, and we feel that it's important that we challenge injustice and raise concerns on behalf of people everywhere whenever we can. So there will be an opportunity for you to hear us debate this. I think it's likely that there will be a fairly cross-party consensus in support of the motion. But thank you very much for coming here to address us today, and our hopes and prayers are with your families and the communities in Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now moving on to a question from Judith Harley. I think you know the ropes by now. 3 minutes.
Is this on?
Yes.
Lord Mayor, councillors, this month several issues of the Oxford Mail have reported on significant support given by Oxford City Council to the prospect of reviving the Oxford Greyhound Stadium in Blackbird Leys. On 2nd November, the Mail stated that the council has produced a new report exploring how it could help a private company or charity bring the much-missed stadium back into use as a leisure facility. And on 15th November, Councillor Hollingsworth is reported as saying that if the current owners of the stadium do not cooperate with council plans to bring it back into use, then the council would be prepared to ask for a government compulsory purchase order to force a sale to revive the stadium and save it from destruction. I have addressed council several times in the last 2 years over the William Morris Sports Ground in Temple Cowley because residents value this as a protected open space and wish to see it returned in its entirety to public use for open-air sport and informal leisure activities. I have twice asked the council to make a compulsory purchase order for this site to bring it back into use for leisure and recreation. On both occasions, the council has declined, citing not using taxpayers' money, but has never suggested the facilitator rescue route offered to the stadium. Why is there such a difference in attitude from the council in reviving the Greyhound Stadium, yet destroying the William Morris Sports Field? Both are much-missed leisure facilities, now in private ownership and closed by their owners. In both cases, residents wish the current landowners would reopen the sites for public use. Both could be run by a private company or charity for public benefit. For the Greyhound Stadium, the City Council is prepared to undertake a facilitating role with a development partner or leisure operator, and if the owner is unwilling to cooperate, use compulsory purchase powers to buy the site to enable a third-party operator to bring the facility back into use. Why not do this for the William Morris Sports Ground? The City Council is even writing a special policy into Local Plan 2036 to bring the stadium back into use to prevent its permanent loss, whereas the William Morris Sports Ground has no such protection. Councillor Hollingsworth is quoted as saying, "Oxford Stadium is a valuable community asset." We feel the same about the William Morris Sports Ground, which is a gift and legacy from William Morris, Lord Nuffield, to his workers at the local car factory and to the local community. Why won't the council offer a similar facilitator rescue for this site and ask for a government compulsory purchase order to assist revival of the William Morris Sports Ground and preserve this heritage asset as a tribute to Lord Nuffield and his philanthropy and beneficence? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you have a written response there from Councillor Hollingsworth. Do you wish to add anything? No. Okay, thank you very much. We're now moving to Judith Harley again for an address on rules on lobbying councillors. You have an address, 5 minutes.
Lord Mayor, councillors, according to section 24.8, lobbying, in the Planning Code of Practice, in the latest City Council Constitution, July 2019, councillors should not lobby each other on planning applications, nor should they put pressure on officers to make a particular recommendation, or do anything which compromises or is likely to compromise the officer's impartiality or professional integrity. Surely this prohibition, especially on lobbying each other, thwarts and compromises the ability of councillors to inform other members of concerns from ward residents over unsuitable and inappropriate developments in their ward. With this veto in place, and the threat of being reported to the Standards Committee for councillors who breach this section, accidentally or otherwise, how can councillors perform their obligations to represent their constituents and their constituents' views? Section 24.23 of the Constitution, responsibility for this code, identifies that the head of planning services and the monitoring officer have overall responsibility for this code. They will review how the code is working. I would suggest that section 24.8 of the code is not working, as it prevents my ward councillors and everyone else's from representing and discussing my views and those of other residents with their colleagues when it comes to dealing with planning applications. This is quite extraordinary, inappropriate and most unreasonable. Please will Council revise section 24.8 of the Constitution to remove this ban on lobbying on planning applications. I want all of you to be able to represent your constituents and their views, which includes lobbying on planning matters, as fully and freely as possible to other members, and I hope that you would want this too. As the head of planning services and the monitoring officer have been identified as having overall responsibility for this code, please will Council ask them to make the appropriate amendments and remove the threat of reporting to the Standards Committee any councillor who discusses or lobbies a planning application with their colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think Councillor Brown's going to give a response.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Judith, I'm not sure you've seen this yet, but there's a written response. Joe, perhaps you might give the one that's in the desk in front of you, or somebody can. Thank you. So that's the written response from officers, which explains the detail of why the code is as it is. I think what I would just add to that, and obviously you'll want to digest that, is that the essence of the code is to make sure that people can understand the probity of councillors, and that you can rest assured that your councillors are not doing anything improper and are not acting using their influence in an undue way. Councillors on the planning committees in particular have to be particularly careful, and that is what the code says. I think in addition to that, those councillors and all councillors are perfectly able to submit in response to a particular planning application concerns on behalf of their constituents to the planning officers. The concern that is being raised here is about doing it directly to other members of the planning committee. And I think that's the important distinction that's being made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe that guidance has been circulated to councillors, so people will be familiar with that subtlety. So thank you for raising it. And now we have an address by Artwell.